Good morning, everybody. So we are just about ready to get started. My name is Casey Turgeon. I'm the marketing coordinator for Polaris MEP, and I'm going to kick off our human error reduction webinar today with Chris Cinieri. For those who haven't worked with us yet, I want to let you guys know who we are. So Polaris MEP is a nonprofit consulting group, and our sole mission is to help small and medium-sized manufacturers in the state of Rhode Island. We do this in a variety of ways, but today we're looking at how manufacturers can reduce human error in their facilities using quality management systems. Quality management systems is one area in which Polaris MEP supports manufacturers. Some of the areas in which we help are conducting gap analysis when you are planning to create a quality management system, helping facilitate the creation of a quality management system, and training your team of internal auditors to help you be compliant. Our presenter today is Chris Cinieri. Chris leads the delivery of quality consulting services and training, such as helping clients with ISO 9001:2015 compliance readiness. He's also the president of the Rhode Island chapter of the American Society for Quality. So it looks like we're about ready to get started. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to send them my way using the chat feature. We're going to have time for questions at the end of our presentation. And Chris, is it time to dive into the world of operator error?
Yes, Casey, I think it is. And thank you so much for the introduction. And I also would like to thank everybody for joining us this morning. We've got quite an action-packed webinar planned for you. A lot of information coming your way. As Casey said, it's going to be recorded, so you'll receive a copy of the recording in days to come. So let's look at our agenda for this morning. Why discuss operator error in the first place? We're going to talk about that, but I can tell you that this is the first time Polaris MEP has presented this content, and it's generated a lot of interest. We have been getting a lot of notes from companies who want to attend today, who wants more information on this. And it sounds like something that many manufacturers are dealing with. So it's very relevant, and we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about the background on the study of human error. We'll look at some of the types of human error, some of the categories that they fall into, and also the factors that can cause human error. And finally, we're going to look at what are some of the ways that we can mitigate and or eliminate human error. So that's our agenda for today. Okay, so why discuss operator error reduction? Why are we here this morning? Well, operator or human error is consistently used by organizations all over the world as one of the leading root causes for incidents, accidents, discrepancies, etc. It has become so ubiquitous that it's often used as a crutch or an easy way out that quickly assigns blame and moves on. And often the resulting corrective action is listed as retraining. So if I were to take a poll, and I'm not going to, but just think to yourself, have you ever had a corrective action or seen a corrective action that listed human or operator error as the root cause and retraining as the corrective action? And then further, if you have, how successful was it? Was there a recurrence? So this too is ineffective as the true root cause, because the true root cause is not understood. Operator error can never be the root cause of the issue. The true root cause is usually the absence of a best practice or a standard work or failure to take human factors into consideration when planning an operation. Issues such as noise, lighting, scheduling, temperature, and others. And we're going to talk about those this morning. And lastly, many registrars are now rejecting corrective actions that list human error as a root cause. We're getting a lot of calls from companies that we're seeing who say, I just had an audit and my auditor said, do not hand me back a corrective action with human error listed as the root cause. I will reject it. I will give it back to you and tell you to dig deeper. So, and looking a few years down the road, and again, I'm not part of an ISO technical committee, so I don't know this, but I have to imagine that at some point in the future, you may see something formally in a standard addressing operator error or human error because it's that important. So on your screen, you're going to see some statistics going by related to human error. Now, while human productivity has been measured for decades, beginning with Frederick Taylor's scientific management and Henry Landsberger's Hawthorne effect, the idea of human error wasn't studied in earnest until the mid-1980s when two industrial accidents, the Challenger shuttle and Chernobyl, happened. So both of those accidents happened months apart. It was January 28th and April 26th of 1986. Both resulted in loss of life. And both also happened on the world stage, which made them subject to exacting scrutiny by government agents. So many of us who remember the Challenger incident remember that the Rogers Commission was put together subsequently to look into it and come up with root causes as to how this could have happened. So that's when we started to really see human error or operator error come to the forefront. Here's a wonderful quote, and I tell this to almost everyone I work with. Dr. Deming said, "A bad system will beat a good person every time." And I love this quote, and it really has a lot to do with what we're here to talk about today. So let's look at the categories into which human errors fall. And as we review them, think about any recent incidents you may have come across in your role, and think about which one of these categories they would fall under. So the first category, slips and lapses. So slips and lapses are made inadvertently by experienced operators during routine tasks. Okay, and we're going to be looking at some of the internal issues in an organization that could cause slips and lapses to happen. The next category is mistakes. So mistakes are decisions that are subsequently found to be wrong, though at the time, the maker believed them to be correct. And these are usually caused by poor training or a lack of standards. And the last type of human error are violations. And this is, not one of the more popular ones. We don't see this very often. But violations are deliberate deviations from rules for safe operation. Oftentimes we think of retaliation as an example. So again, doesn't happen often. These types of errors tend to result in either disciplinary action or removal from position. So a lot of what we see tends to fall into the first two categories, slips and lapses and mistakes. Now let's look at some of the contributing factors in the workplace that can lead to human error. And the first factor is the job itself. So let's think about distractions. Are there any distractions present? Are there other folks in the area? Are there conversations taking place? Anything that might distract that operator from focusing on performing their job? A lack of time. Is there enough time allotted to be able to do it successfully? Inadequate or non-existent procedures. You're going to hear us talk this morning a lot about standard work. How about environment? Things like poor lighting, extremes of temperature and humidity. All of these come together to present an opportunity for human error as part of the job. Now, the next factor to look at are human factors. So we're talking here about physical ability. We're talking about competency. Have we put somebody into a position for which they don't have the skills or the experience or the knowledge for? And then physical factors, fatigue and stress. Do we take those into consideration as well? And we can go back to distractions and inadequate procedures and lack of time leading to this stress and fatigue. There's organizational factors. Organizational factors can include work pressure. Is there a lot of pressure to get the job done in a certain amount of time? Long hours. There have been studies that show above a certain number of work hours per week, productivity tends to fall. And that comes back to fatigue and stress. Insufficient supervision. Are folks left to make decisions in a vacuum? And sometimes they make a decision to move forward because of pressure, and it turns out to be the wrong decision. So insufficient supervision can be a cause, and lack of open communication. And by this, we mean the ability for folks to be comfortable enough to raise their hand and ask a question when they're unsure. And the last contributing factor can be plant and equipment. So we're talking about things like poor equipment design, poor workplace layout, poor flow of materials and information, equipment that's not calibrated. All of these fall into contributing factors for plant and equipment. So again, there are job factors, there are human factors, organizational, and plant and equipment factors as well. Now, for those of us who operate under a quality management system, such as ISO 9001, the corrective action process is familiar, and along with it, the need to arrive at a true root cause. For those not familiar with the corrective action process, arriving at a true root cause means investigating until you understand why the incident happened, and then prepare countermeasures so that it doesn't happen again. This is necessary to learn from mistakes and prevent them from happening again, so that we're not fighting the same fires over and over again. So on the slide, you can see we need to push past human error to find the true root cause. And there's a lot of tools available to do this. A lot of companies use 5 whys as a tool to arrive at a root cause. Some companies use fishbone diagrams. Other companies might use fault tree analysis. And to be honest, the tool is what you're comfortable with. It doesn't really matter which one, so long as you follow that investigation through to its logical cause, which is past human error. So there's a saying, just because no accidents have occurred yet does not mean working conditions are safe. So in much the same way, there could be possible warning signs that your organization could experience a preventable error made by an operator. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to look at a few of the top non-conformances that are found by registrars when auditing ISO 9001 systems, and we'll talk just a little bit about how they can lead to human error. So again, as we go through these, if you're ISO certified and you're familiar with the audit process, perhaps you've come across a few of these. So records of competency are not retained or complete. That would tell us that as an organization, we really can't point to something that says that an operator is skilled or should be working in a certain position. We don't have evidence to show for that. No defined process to determine training needs in order to develop training plans and address competency gaps. So again, this can lead to us improperly installing an operator into an area where that person is not going to succeed. Refresher training not occurring per schedule. Let's say there are some changes. There could be changes in our industry. There could be changes to equipment, and refresher training is critical. For those in the food world, what happened recently? We had the Food Safety Modernization Act. Changed a lot of the ways you have to operate, correct? So refresher training is critical. No training tracking system for follow-up of employees to miss required training. So I speak from experience on this. Has it ever happened where you've had training as an organization, and on that particular day, one person was on vacation and another called out sick? So there are 2 folks who didn't go through that training. Do you have a plan in place to get them trained when they return to the workplace? So sometimes that goes missed. And guess what? By the way, those are going to be the folks that the auditor asks to see their training records during an audit. Guaranteed. You know it happens. Inadequate or insufficient resources to support operations. Think back to that job factor when we talk about the causes of human error, not giving people what they need to be able to be successful in their position, which leads to people becoming creative, which leads to people taking shortcuts. And then we have an error on our hands. A few more of these warning signs. Equipment not calibrated per schedule. If we're working to a drawing that's holding a tolerance of 1/2 thou, and we have a mic that's off by 10 thou, well, that's a problem. And if it's not calibrated, if that operator doesn't check it against the gauge block, how would they know? Equipment not in the calibration system. So we've got a list, whether it's online or whether it's by a simple spreadsheet. And maybe we have employees bringing in tools from home. How do you know that it's calibrated? How do you know that it's giving you accurate measurements? Documented information is not available at the point of use or to personnel needing to use it. So we talk a lot about lack of standards, inadequate standards, incorrect standards. How about we have the standard, but it's just not available? Can we expect operators to memorize fully a 15 or 17, 18 step process without having something to reference? So something to keep in mind. Standardized work instructions, wow, we keep going back to this, do not reflect current process activity, are incomplete, or simply don't exist. So many times we might do an initial great job of documenting a process, but a process is not a fixed thing. Okay, processes are dynamic, they change with time. And we have to make sure that we're going back and making sure our standardized instructions are adequately reflecting those changes. And standardized work instructions and quality plans are not consistently followed. This happens a lot in multi-shift operations as well, where you just have one shift doing one way and another shift doing another. So these are just some of the warning signs. Again, they're top non-conformances pulled by registrars when they're auditing quality management systems. But when you think about each of these, okay, again, going back to the quote, just because we've not had any accidents doesn't mean we have a safe workplace. If you've seen in your internal audits or your external audits any of these warning signs, the potential exists that an operator error could occur. Okay, so how can we move from correction to prevention? That's why we're here today. Like so many other organizational changes, it begins with a commitment from the top. And this commitment is to continual improvement. So only when an organization shifts their mindset to one of respect for people, which is one of the biggest principles of lean, only then can real improvement begin. So let's look at some of the tools and tactics that are available to us as organizations to help us mitigate those contributing factors to human error. And they are Lean 5S, visual management, lean principles and rules. We're going to talk about this. This is very important as it sets the foundation for a lean journey and a change to a lean culture. Kata Problem Solving, a very structured and rigid methodology for problem solving, which helps us arrive at root causes. And training within industry coaching. We'll talk a little bit about this. This is powerful coaching to help improve training programs. So many companies are familiar with 5S. The 5S's stand for sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain. And indeed, a lot of companies have tried to implement this practice into their facilities. Many of these companies, however, struggle with the final S, which is sustain. And again, I'm sure if I were to poll those of us on the call today, you would probably say, yes, we have often had trouble keeping that going. It can be a fun exercise to go through an area, remove unnecessary items, create a home for what remains, clean it up, but oftentimes it reverts to the way it was previously in a short amount of time. And again, this can be further exacerbated in plants that have multiple shifts. Only once the organization can build a lean culture based upon the rules and principles of lean can it begin to sustain this practice. So again, Lean 5S, very powerful tool, requires a change in mindset to a lean culture, but can greatly mitigate a lot of the operator error categories that you see. Visual workplace. So when we talk about visual workplace, we're talking about using signs, using drawings, using floor markings, etc., to answer questions before they are asked. And some of those questions are listed here on the slide. What needs to be done, where it needs to go, where it comes from, who does it, how many need to be done, etc. The goal with creating a visual workplace is to answer questions before they are asked. So if you, as a leader in your organization, find that you are asked the same question more than once, there's a good possibility that there's an opportunity to anticipate and answer that question using a visual tool. So again, operator comes up to you and asks you a question. Some point in time in the future, a different operator comes to you and asks you that very same question. In your mind, you can be thinking about, okay, more than one person has asked this now. There's obviously an opportunity for me to do something differently. Let's look at the picture on this slide. This is a powerful picture. And when I talk about answering questions before they're asked, let's think about a supervisor who has to go through a department prior to shutdown for the day. And they want to know, are all of the cordless drills accounted for? If they take a look at that shadow board on the wall there, they have their answer. I don't have to go and find an operator and ask the question, have we accounted for all of the cordless drills? I simply look at that board and I know that we've not. So now my question becomes, well, what happened to that last drill there? So you can see how quickly it answers questions and what a powerful tool it is. So what are those 5 principles and 4 rules of lean that we talked about? This is the foundation of a true lean culture. And a lot of us are familiar with graphics of the lean house with the foundation and such. The foundation here would be the 4 rules of lean. And those 4 rules are activities, connections, flows, and improvements. So activities, defining what the activity is. What is the process? What needs to happen? Connections talk about what needs to happen to connect everything within that process. And this can be both material and information. Flows, same thing. How does product flow through that process? And also, how does information flow through that process? Is it simple and straightforward? Or are there a lot of loopbacks and questions? And improvements, small and rapid. A lot of people talk about Kaizen events and Kaizen blitzes. So once we've got the rules in place, now we can look at the 5 principles of lean. And those are directly observe work, go to the Gemba, actually observe the process as it happens to get your answers to your questions. Systematic waste elimination. Lean is all about let's identify and eliminate waste in a structured manner. Systematic problem solving. So again, arriving at true root causes so that we can come up with countermeasures. Strong agreement of both what and how we're going to do things. And this is among leadership, right? We can't have siloed mentality where we have department leaders all following their own drumbeat. There has to be strong agreement. And then, of course, in the middle, we see learn, innovate, and improve. So to have a lean culture, you have to have a mindset of continual improvement. And continual improvement also found its way into the 2015 revision of ISO 9001. It's that important. So we see a lot of companies benefit from training on the 4 rules and 5 principles of a lean organization. How about Kata problem solving? Some of you may or may not be familiar with this. So Kata is a problem solving methodology. You're creating incremental, continuous improvement by repeating a 4-step routine that teaches and facilitates a logical approach to problem solving. And when this is practiced, problem solving the Kata way can become a skill that becomes second nature when dealing and resolving issues in the workplace. So we're moving from problem solving as a distractor to our job to problem solving as something that's going to help us in our role. And again, it helps us arrive at that true root cause to allow for a successful corrective action, to allow us to push past that initial human error root cause that a lot of us fall victim to. And using training within industry. So training within industry is not something new. This is actually something that was created during World War II as a way to get folks trained quickly to take over factory positions as those operators went overseas to the war. It's a dynamic and proven method of hands-on training, learning, and coaching. It's for supervisors, it's for team leaders, it's for workers. It can be learned and applied by itself or in conjunction with other problem solving and improvement programs, such as lean programs, such as Kata Problem Solving, okay, using 5 whys and fishbone diagrams and tools such as that. Training within industry builds skills, stability, safety, and confidence. And it develops frontline people as the engine for sustainable results in the workplace. Training within industry is a very popular program that helps manufacturers, and I'm going to pick on machine shops here. Machine shops, we hear a lot from machine shops where they have a workforce that's quickly approaching retirement. And how do we capture that knowledge? How do we capture those years of experience and transfer that to this up and coming workforce that we're seeing now? How do we get those special skills and all those little tips and tricks out of that experienced machinist head and into the new hire? Training within industry is a really great program to be able to do that. And we're seeing a lot of folks utilize this and utilize it successfully to be able to transfer that knowledge and continue their operation. So how can Polaris MEP help your organization move from correction to prevention? Well, our team of experts provides training in all of the areas that we discussed today. We work together with your team to understand your needs and your environment and put together a training program that works for you. So the important thing here is it's not out of the box training. When clients come to us and say, we're looking for help with X, the first thing we'll do is go in and have a gap analysis and a conversation to understand truly the nature of your business, how you're operating now. One of the things that we're looking at are those activities, connections, and flows that we talked about that are so important. And a lot of times we'll come back to the table and present a plan that a lot of times companies will look and say, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is what we are missing. And here's something that we think can help us. And we're able to help you with any instance that you might want to help us, have us come in to help with. So again, one of the things that we're looking for is to have that understanding today of what are some of the types of categories that human error falls into. How do they happen? You know, what are some of the ways that they're set up to happen within our organization? What are some of the ways that we can mitigate it? And then, as always, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, so that's a lot of information in a short time. And like we said at the beginning, we're recording this webinar today, so that'll be available to go out to you in a few days. But what do you say, Casey, that we take some questions, because I'm sure there may be some folks who may or may not have something on their mind, and we'd like to be able to help answer that for you this morning.
Sure, sounds excellent. So let me turn down my thing here. Alrighty, so we actually already have a couple of questions. So our first question is, how would you prioritize areas for continual improvement activities?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm almost thinking that in the mind of that person, they're thinking, wow, we just have so many different things that we could work on. It's overwhelming. You know, how do we really stop and come up with a plan? And there's two ways I can think of. One is to use a tool like a 2x2 matrix. A lot of times you'll see it called an Eisenhower matrix, where you have, you know, important on one axis and urgent on the other axis. And you just want to tackle what's important. So you can categorize some of your improvement projects in that manner. The other way I would suggest is if you have a risk plan or a risk management plan, if you're ISO certified, certainly you have this, take a risk-based approach to your improvement plan, which is to say, we've identified certain areas that have more risk than others, certain areas that we've seen more issues than others, and that's obviously where you're going to want to start. So use either a risk-based approach, or you can use a prioritization matrix, such as a 2x2 matrix, to help you. Great question.
All righty, and we have another here. How do we get employees to buy in to this?
Another great question. So a lot of times it's easy to say, well, our employees, we do this, we'll go through a 5S exercise, they don't buy into it, and it reverts. You've got to include them in the process, number one. So when we talked earlier about go to the Gemba, that is, we're not making decisions in a conference room. We're actually going to the area, we're observing the work, we're talking to those folks doing the work, and we're involving them in the solution. And if you walk out of an improvement event and there was something simple that was brought up, do it. Go ahead and give the employees a quick win, because that's going to show them that, in fact, you were out there to help improve that process and to help improve their work environment. If you can show them that, if you can demonstrate that objectively, that's going to go a long way to helping with that buy-in. So again, go to the area, involve the people, but also throw them a quick win if it's within your wheelhouse. It's going to make such a difference. Really good question. Thank you.
All right. And next we have, how do you deal with site problems that you can't solve?
Site problems you can't solve. Well, I would get together as a team and arrive at why we can't solve it, and put together a mitigation plan around that. Let me use an example. Sometimes we'll see that there's a company that is a subsidiary or has a parent company or something, maybe out of state. And that parent company will dictate what they do as far as improvement plans, et cetera. So sometimes that can be frustrating. If you're able to make the case in this instance, if you're able to make an objective case with data behind it, that can show costs, that can show error rates or any kind of data. Data is powerful. So if the cause is that we simply don't have the authority, I would build a case to those who do using data. For any other case where we can't, again, can't such a powerful word, I would really come together as a team and dive deep into, if we can't control this, what can we control, and focus on that instead.
All right, any other questions? Give you guys a few minutes if you have any other questions.
And again, just to recap quickly, we're going to be sending this webinar out, and I thank everybody for coming. We had a lot of interest in this topic. That tells me we've struck a chord here. That tells me this is important to a lot of organizations. And it's not just manufacturing, even though we're focusing here on manufacturing, but always think the three categories that the error falls into. What are some of the factors that cause that? And that'll help you move past human error in terms of a root cause. And then all of the different ways that you can mitigate that using proven strategies.
Alrighty, we actually do have another one. So this question is about using a Poka yoke to error-proof existing processes as a tool for reducing human error.
Wow, that's a really great tool, and that's something that for my continual improvement benefit, I'm going to add to these slides. Poka yoke is a really great tool, and it aims to prevent mistakes from happening in the first place. So you've got think about tamper evident versus tamper proof, right? So you open a bottle of soda and the seal breaks. That's tamper evident. That's a good prevention, but think of tamper proof. An example of something that's tamper proof where I simply cannot tamper with it unless I'm authorized to. That is the idea behind Poka yoke. It's simply, we put a measure in place that won't allow a mistake to happen. There are physical examples of this, etc. So another really great tool to use if you can. A lot of companies will go around an area when they're doing a Kaizen blitz, and they'll look for opportunities to put Poka yokes in place. And this could be creating a jig for a fixture or something along those lines. Really simple, really powerful tools. Great example there. I appreciate that.
Alrighty. How do we encourage employees to continue to use the systems that they've helped make?
If you're able to demonstrate to them that it's beneficial to the work environment, to their own job, and you're able to continually demonstrate that, that's going to raise the awareness and that's going to get people to want to continue. So anytime you go down a lean journey, it doesn't happen overnight. And you can talk to any company who's had success with it and they'll tell you, but you have to keep at it. And once you get over that critical mass, then it becomes a lot easier to sustain because people realize the benefit and they realize that they played a role in it. So always think back to respect for people, including people in our investigations and in our improvement talks, and get them to be part owner. And that goes a long way to helping them to want to sustain rather than say, this is solely for the benefit of the company and it doesn't benefit me at all. Good question.
So we still have a few here. How do you deal with pressure and deadlines? Pressure
and deadlines. That's a tough one because it's not always often cut and dry where the pressure and deadline comes from. It could be self-imposed. It could come from middle management, could come from senior management. Again, it could come from that parent company that exists somewhere across the states or across the globe. So the best way to deal with that is data. If you can come up with data that shows a particular process cannot be successfully, safely, and efficiently done in a certain amount of time, then that's grounds to come together as a team and question that process. And should we reevaluate it? Are we losing more money in doing so on rework and scrap and warranty costs because we're under pressure to get something out the door? Then we are saving money by having a lower cycle time, right? So it's not often easy, but if you can use the cost of quality to your advantage, again, scrap, rework, warranty costs versus the cost of doing within a certain time, then you've got a pretty powerful argument to be able to go to somebody and say, maybe we should revisit this.
Awesome. And lastly here, how do you mitigate human error due to small repetitive tasks?
Small repetitive tasks are difficult. A lot of companies enjoy success where they rotate people. If you're a small shop and it's not an option for you, then it can be difficult. So rotating people, that's going to require cross training. But it could be an hour in a position and then everybody rotates. It could be everybody rotates after a break or a lunch. Just anything so that when I come back to my station, it's a little bit different, keeps me on my toes, requires my brain to think a little bit differently. If you don't have the ability or the size to rotate people, you've got to build something in that creates that natural break, something that the person can reset their mind. So it could be if you're able to build a break into the work and have the person do an activity. And I don't care what that activity is, it could be completely non-work related. Or could be something where we'll go into another area and help out with something and come back. Just something to break the routine. All you're looking to do is to get that person's brain to think differently for a small period of time and then come back to the work, rather than 2, 3 or more hours continuously doing that. So rotation, if you can, that's probably the easiest and the quickest method. And if you can't, can you build in a routine break with an activity, cleanup, what have you? Just something to get their mind to think differently and switch back into gear. That would be my recommendation there.
All righty. So that is all the questions we have today.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank everybody so much.
Well, thank you, Chris, for presenting today, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you again, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day.